The blizzard rolled in faster than anyone expected. It was supposed to be a mild winter storm, the kind that left a gentle dusting of snow across the small town of Hartsville, Montana. But by nightfall, the wind howled like a freight train, snow came down in white sheets, and the temperature plummeted to -20. Highways shut down. Visibility dropped to zero. Truckers were stranded on Route 19, 10 of them in total, each alone in their rigs, engines running to keep the cold at bay, low on fuel, lower on hope. And that's when he showed up. No one really paid much attention to Walt Granger. A 64-year-old widower with a scruffy beard and a limp from an old logging accident, he lived on the edge of town in a modest cabin that most folks assumed was abandoned. He kept to himself, didn't say much, and drove an old Ford pickup with more rust than paint. Most just figured he was another forgotten soul tucked into the backdrop of a quiet town. But that night, Walt did something no one saw coming. Walt had been listening to his radio, one of those old analog things that still worked when the power went out. The emergency broadcast came on around 8 p.m., warning drivers to stay off Route 19. But what caught his attention was the dispatcher's panicked voice crackling through the static. "We've got multiple semis jackknifed and stuck on the East Ridge. No tow access. No snowplows. Drivers are stranded, some without heat. No backup until morning." Walt sat in silence, staring at the wall of snow outside his cabin. Then he slowly stood up, reached for his coat, and grabbed his battered thermos. He filled it with hot coffee, tossed in a bag of granola bars, some wool blankets, extra gloves, and a bottle of whiskey, just in case, he muttered, and climbed into his old Ford. Everyone else was hunkered down that night, lights off, heat turned down low to conserve fuel. No one would have blamed Walt for doing the same. But he remembered the years he worked as a long-haul trucker. He knew the feeling of being stuck in a snowstorm, far from home, scared to fall asleep because the heater might quit. He'd once lost a friend that way. Froze to death in his cab. No one reached him in time. He wasn't about to let that happen again. The road was a mess, snow piled knee-high, ice hiding beneath every bend, but Walt knew it like the back of his hand. After all, he had hauled timber up and down that pass for 30 years. He engaged the four-wheel drive, lowered his headlights, and inched his way up the ridge, defying logic, reason, and the laws of traction. And then he saw them. One by one, rigs emerged from the swirling snow, lined along the ridge like frozen beasts. Their drivers were huddled inside, cold, hungry, and alone. Walt started with the nearest truck, climbing up to knock on the driver's side window. "You alive in there?" he shouted. A young man cracked the window, face pale and lips blue. "Barely." Walt passed him a blanket and some coffee. Then he moved to the next truck. And the next. He did that for 10 trucks, checking pulses, handing out supplies, even pouring a splash of whiskey into gloved hands just to bring color back to their faces. One driver, an older woman named Carolyn, was already unconscious when Walt found her. He carried her back to his truck and cranked the heat. He stayed with her until she came to, whispering stories about the road, about the good old days, anything to keep her alert. He stayed up the whole night. Engine running. Heart racing. Hands shaking from the cold. But he didn't leave. Morning brought more than just daylight. The snow began to slow. Rescue crews finally made their way up the ridge, but what they found left them speechless. 10 truckers, bruised but alive. Alert. Breathing. And one old man sitting by his Ford, sipping cold coffee, nodding like nothing had happened. News spread fast. A local EMT told the press, if Walt hadn't gotten to them when he did, we'd be dragging out bodies instead of survivors. By noon, Walt's story was on local radio. By evening, it was on national news. The man who saved 10 truckers from a frozen death became the headline across North America. But Walt didn't care about the attention. He disappeared just as quickly as he had appeared, retreating to his quiet cabin as reporters scrambled to find him. But the town of Hartsville wasn't about to forget. The mayor called an emergency town meeting 3 days later, something unheard of in Hartsville. The entire community showed up, teachers, farmers, truckers, even high school kids who barely knew his name. And when Walt walked in, still wearing the same weather-beaten coat, they all stood up. Not out of obligation. Not because they were told to. But because a man with nothing had given everything. The mayor handed him a plaque, but Walt looked uncomfortable. "I didn't do it for a medal," he mumbled. "I did it because I've been on the other side of that windshield." And just when the town thought the story had ended, something else happened. 2 weeks later, a convoy of trucks rolled into Hartsville. 10 big rigs, one after the other, each with a custom banner, "Thank you, Walt." They'd all returned, the very drivers he had saved, to deliver something special. They pooled their money, called in favors, and rebuilt Walt's entire cabin. New roof, new insulation, a fireplace, solar panels, and a full pantry. One driver handed him the keys to a brand new Ford pickup. "From all of us," he said, "so you don't have to risk your life in a rust bucket again." Walt's eyes welled up. He didn't speak. He just nodded. Walt Granger never asked for praise. He never wanted fame. But what he did on that stormy night reminded the world, and a quiet little town, what real courage and compassion look like. Not grand gestures. Not viral moments. But one man, one truck, and a heart big enough to brave a blizzard for people he didn't even know. And from that day on, Hartsville didn't just remember Walt. They became Walt. Neighbors helped neighbors. Strangers offered shelter. Kids shoveled elderly driveways without being asked. Kindness wasn't just a story. It became a way of life. Because sometimes, it only takes one man's quiet act of courage to wake up an entire town's heart.